Good evening, my name is Tom Byrne. I'm the President and CEO of the Korea Society. Since 2011, the Korea Society's Young Professionals Network has been providing young adults a wide platform to connect with other professionals, to develop their careers by learning lessons from experienced practitioners, and to grow their interests in Korea and in the Korea-US relationship. Over the past decade, the program has invited speakers from diverse backgrounds, ranging from the arts, culture, education, finance, policy, international relations, journalism, business, IT, and technology, to share their career and life experiences with an audience of college and graduate students as well as young professionals. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic forced the YPN to shift to a virtual format. Accordingly, the program adapted by expanding the range of speakers and audiences locally and internationally, as well as partnering with other young professional organizations, including the Asia American Journalists Association, the Council of Korean Americans, Korea Finance Society, and Korean startups and entrepreneurs. Recently, the Hong Kong-based family foundation, Young One Son, has joined us as our new partner in supporting the program's audience reach within the United States and beyond internationally. We will now hear the welcoming remarks of Ali Tae-young Kwok, the director of Young One Son Foundation.
First and foremost, I would like to say congratulations to the Korea Society for its decade-long success of its Young Professional Network program. Hello, my name is Ali Kwok and I am the director of the YWS Foundation. We are a foundation based in Hong Kong that aspires to bring a sense of community among the pan-Korean diaspora. We are very happy to be able to provide support to YPN, given its unique platform that brings people from different walks of life to share their personal stories. Very much looking forward to the next decade, and hopefully we get to attend these lovely programs in person sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kwok, for your remarks. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the Young Professionals Network, and I am excited to introduce the multi-talented Korean-American celebrity Eric Nam as our guest speaker for tonight's anniversary celebration. Hailing from Atlanta, Georgia, Eric is one of the most popular and recognizable celebrities in Asia. As a Korean-American singer, songwriter, entertainer, and TV personality, Mr. Nam has been inspiring his fans and the younger generation through his musical performances and insightful commentary on important contemporary issues. He was named GQ Korea's Man of the Year and appeared in Forbes 30 Under 30 Asia. Mr. Nam is one of the most extensively touring solo Asian acts in the world and is also the co-founder and creative director of Dive Studios and Mindset. Tonight's interview will be led by Grace Lee, head of artist relations at YouTube. Grace is an accomplished music executive with over 15 years of experience. She currently leads YouTube's East Coast Artist Relations team, where she is passionate about helping artists in all stages of their careers. Prior to joining YouTube, Grace spent 9 years at Columbia Records, where she worked with all artists across the roster, including Adele, Beyonce, John Legend, Daft Punk, and J. Cole. Grace is also a co-founder of the Asian American Collective, a networking and mentoring organization for Asian Americans in the music industry. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite Eric Nam and Grace Lee for our 10th anniversary special.
Thank you, Tom. Eric, so good to see you.
So good to see you.
Thank you for being here today. Look at us.
Of course, thank you
Just
for
a
having
couple
me.
of old friends talking
It's gonna be
to
so
the
much
Young
fun.
Professionals Network. I know, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. Eric, I have lots of questions for our audience today from the Korea Society. But before we get into that, I want to ask you a question that I heard recently and I found so interesting as an icebreaker question.
Okay.
And that is, what would you be doing if you weren't doing what you do?
Oh, sheesh.
If you weren't doing any of the things that you do, which we know there's a lot, what would you be doing?
I think I imagine I'd probably be at a consulting firm or
Okay.
something in entertainment. I'm not sure. I feel like I'm at this point in my life where I'm doing so many things that I think I would still be
Indeed.
doing one of the many things, probably just more focused. But I think it would probably be in
Okay.
consulting or trying to be the next Grace is what I would be doing. Trying to be the next
Oh
Stu.
my goodness. Well, this is off to a strong start. Eric, you flatter me. So let's get into it. You grew up in Atlanta.
I did.
And Atlanta, as a lot of folks know, has a sizable Korean American population, but it's probably not as well known for that as other cities like New York and LA and even Dallas. So what do you think makes Atlanta special, and how was it like growing up there?
Yeah, Atlanta is a very interesting city. I feel like people attach themselves to Atlanta for various different reasons, and I'll start it off by saying it's changed a lot from when I was born and raised there, and even in the past 10 years, where I think it's developed so much economically, socioeconomically, racially. So it's not the Atlanta that I knew, but for me growing up, it was a very, at least for me, a very white Atlanta. I think I was with somebody yesterday, and they're like, I think of Atlanta, I just think a lot of Black people. And I was like, well, it's literally, it feels very segregated in many ways. But I grew up in the suburbs of Atlanta. Not a lot of Koreans there at the time when we were growing up. And it was interesting because as the years went on, we saw more Koreans move into the suburbs where I was living, and church became very big. And that was probably the core of my Korean identity. I think it got a little weird, and I remember having kind of a lot of identity crises, particularly in middle school. When I moved to, I was very blessed to be able to go to a private school, but it was majority white. My first year there, I believe I was the only Asian kid there. And
Wow.
so it was a very rude awakening in many ways. But I'd like to think that those types of experiences allow me to develop a perspective that is unique to who I am today. So yeah.
For sure. You know, something that we've actually never discussed, but I spent a few years growing up in the Atlanta suburbs as well.
Oh, you did?
So I know, isn't that crazy? So I, similarly to you, I definitely was one of one probably. Asian kids, definitely one of one Korean kids in my school and neighborhood and stuff. So I relate. But kind of jumping off what you were talking about in terms of like culture shifting, you definitely straddle, you know, both American culture from being born and raised in the US, and Korean culture, you know, where you built a lot of your career. What do you think have been some sort of, I guess, pros and cons of having such a unique multicultural experience?
Oh man, I'll start with the cons just to get them out there. I think the hardest thing is you're always second guessing yourself. You're always second guessing everything, and it's you wonder if you belong all the time, and you're wondering if you're doing it right all the time, because what's so natural for one culture can be so backwards for another, and vice versa.
True.
And so I think this goes not only to like the American side and the Korean side, but also just growing up where I'm the one of very few Asians in a majority white crowd. Of at home we're like this, but at school or wherever else I am, it's completely in the dark. And so it's in some ways it can sound sad, but I also think it's very relatable for a lot of people, and so many of us have gone through it. But for me, I think if that was the con, the pro is that, like you said, being able to be fluid and bicultural in many ways in different situations and scenarios has become a very, very big pro, a very big skill of mine that has helped me in my career and how I've built my career and just being in any social situation and setting. And I think that's kind of been like, if you look at the arch of my life, for me, that's probably like the crux of it. It's like what once was seen as a very big hindrance or a challenge has kind of transformed itself into becoming a very, very big strength in how I conduct business or create or XYZ.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Do you think that that is something that just comes with sort of time and experience, or do you think that that is sort of related to this unique sort of moment in which we find ourselves where, as you were saying, even thinking about Atlanta of 10 years ago versus Atlanta today, I think if we think about the way that Korean culture is embraced in the US, even 3 years ago, right, compared to how it is now, like, does that sort of have an effect on things too? Maybe it's both.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think time and
Mm,
experience is something that you can't pay for. You have to earn it. You have to work for it. You have to build your way through it.
mhm,
And I think for me, it's like the time and experience allowed me to build this perspective of let's use these dueling identities as a great, strength. But at the same time, it is really cool to see Korean culture coming to the forefront of global popularity and trends and everything. You think movies,
mhm.
you think film, even Squid Game and Parasite and Minari and BTS, but like everything Korean right now is cool, which is so cool, which is so
Isn't
exciting.
it? It's so crazy and so cool at the same
It's
time,
so
right? Like,
cool.
I think there's so many people that, so many Korean Americans really that, and actually immigrants of all backgrounds that have this memory of like the lunchbox, right? And like the
Hmm.
stuff that maybe you brought to lunch where people would make fun of you or think it smells or something like that. And now it's like the cool thing.
Yeah,
And
it's
like kimchi is cool and kimbap is cool and now ojingo is cool. And like,
it's
yeah, it's just
wild.
funny.
I
Yeah.
remember being like, this is seaweed, and be like, what? Seaweed? Or this is squid. Like, you eat
Yeah.
squid.
I
Um,
know.
but I don't know. I
So
think it's really
crazy.
cool to see a sudden change, or like a not sudden, like a gradual change, and a gradual acceptance for what is so natural to us in many ways. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that's kind of, it's been really cool to build music and build shows and be a part of this massive cultural movement. Um, and I'd like to think of myself as somebody that can kind of relatively play in both worlds of being in Korea, having one foot there, and loving what I do there, but also trying to create for a more American or a Western audience where we still have
Mhm.
to fight the good fight, and we still have to show up and represent and fight for representation in the best ways possible.
For sure. For sure. So let's talk a little bit about career. Let's talk a little bit about music and how you've
Yeah.
sort of navigated. Um, I'll start with this sort of on your journey to stardom in Korea. I'm sure you encountered a lot of difficulties, both just
Yeah.
because of the nature of the business, right? But also entering as a kyopo, right? Coming in as a
Hmm.
Korean American. Um, I just am curious about that experience and what, I don't know, do you have memories of a particularly a challenging or just memorable overall experience that came from maybe the early days of your career?
Yeah, I mean, it was I first of all, it's been 10 years since I got to Korea, which is
Wow.
wild. I remember I got there and I was like, oh, I'll probably do like maybe be here 2 years, max 3 years. If
Hmm.
it doesn't work out, I'm going to
Hmm.
go to New York, and I still have my job that I can go back to at some point. And that was kind of like the mentality with which I approached this career of mine. But
Hmm.
I remember it was very difficult because every time I tried to think of something or had an opinion or idea, it was like, oh, but you're too American. You're too
Hmm.
American. You're too white. You're too uh they would say 너무 버터야, like you're too butter, like in the way that it's 느끼해. It's like American, but everything is
Right,
buttery,
right.
everything's greasy. That's what you are. And
Yeah.
that was always the feedback or the pushback that I got with my music, what I liked, the style, like everything. And so I was quickly told to be quiet, to just let you know the people in charge do what they do, and you just listen and you just follow, which goes
Hmm.
against every fiber of my body and my upbringing, and
Yeah,
also
you're American being,
American
right?
ideals. You're like, but I'm
Yeah,
an independent being. And like, well, you're now in the
totally.
process. So like, you just take it. And so that was kind of learning to play by rules in Korea was a very difficult moment for me. And also, mind you, I could barely speak Korean. My Korean was atrocious. And so I remember always being on edge and being stressed all the time because I had no idea what was happening. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so that was kind of like the start. And I don't think I was comfortable speaking in Korean until I was like 5 years in. And even then, I would always be making
Wow, that
mistakes.
long.
Yeah, because
Uh-huh.
they would throw me on any variety show. They would throw me to MC things, and I was like, I have no idea what's happening. So I would just be
Wow.
poorly reading cue cards, hoping that I know what I'm saying, and hoping that I
That
don't get.
sounds so stressful. Sorry. I'm like having anxiety listening to this. This sounds very stressful.
It was. I think back on it, and people are like, "Would you do it again?" I was like, if there was an easier way, I think I would do it again. But it was really hard because it felt so lonely as well. Because all my family's in the States. I don't have any friends really in Korea at the time, um, and the only people that I had to talk to were kind of these company people, and I was supposed to kind of listen
Mm,
to what they're telling me to do. So it was
to
tough, but
everything they said.
yeah, but hey, we're here. We made it. So
Here, we made it.
I'm grateful. So yeah.
So, you mentioned kind of having to, do as you're told and listen to what people were telling you once you got to Korea and were um, in the industry there. And, I think I've heard you talk before about the need or the sort of necessity for the industry in Korea to allow for more artists to express their own individual creativity around health and well-being. And how do you think that that's going so far? And has that evolved since you first sort of noticed those things as a newbie in the industry to now?
Um, I think we've come a very long way. I think there's always things to be done,
Mhm,
things that can change. Um, but I think, looking at what BTS, how they've really launched their careers and being very open and honest about mental health or, things that they struggle with in their lyrics or just even through, live streams and being that open about it has kind of allowed other artists who are younger than them, who are their hubes, I guess,
mhm,
to kind of
mhm,
open up about that as well. Um, so I think that's like a big part. And then also there was a big period in the middle of the 2010s, I guess, where everybody wanted to be seen as a legitimate artist, and the way that they wanted to do that is saying, "I wrote the lyrics to my own song," or "I wrote my own song XYZ." So as that kind of started to happen, and certain groups started to take on this name of, "Oh, we produce our own music," or "We do our own choreography,"
mhm.
um, that allowed artists to be a little more hands-on and involved in their creation process. That's not for all idols, it's not for all musicians, but I
Mhm.
think the tides are slowly changing to kind of be in favor of that. If whatever label may be deems them truly, truly talented enough to do so, I guess.
Right. So, switching gears a little bit, let's talk about your music and your collabs. I mean,
Oh
you
yeah.
have collaborated with so many artists, I think, from the Korean scene and outside of it as well. How do you kind of go about collaborating and how do those sort of magic moments come together?
I'd say every single collaboration has been different.
Hmm.
And when we first started, it was just kind of like, hey, I've only done things alone for so long. I would love to get new voices and new people on my music or to feature on theirs. And that's kind of how we started in Korea of just, be it Somi or Loco,
Hmm.
um, or even on stage with like Vernon of 17 or Jinjin of Astro, just like interesting people that I've always wanted to work with. And then I was like, hey, a great way for me to explore beyond the realms of K-pop and Korea would be to do collaborations with Western artists. And so,
Hmm.
um, there was a writing partner that I had, two actually. They were by the name of Collage, and they were like a new EDM tropical duo, and they were like my first, I guess, collab into the Western world, and that was soon
Mhm.
followed by Timbaland and
Mhm.
Gallant and Tableau, and the list goes on. And most recently, Armand Malik from India, and then
Yep.
Vault Boy, and so the list goes on and on. But I think for me, when I think about collaborations, it's not just, hey, are we going to sound great together, but are we going to be able to help each other grow and challenge each other, not only musically, but also in terms of gaining new listeners and fans, people who may not know of us independently yet, but
Yep.
if I'm a fan of yours and yours a fan of mine, like we can kind of cross pollinate and we make the world a bigger place, and a happier place through that
I
cross
love that.
pollination. So
Totally.
that's kind of the strategy in terms of how
Mhm.
I approach it. But then there's also just people that I would love to work with that,
Mhm.
when I see them or I meet them, I'm like, hey, I'd love to write. I'd love to work with you at some point. And
Yeah,
those come out very naturally.
that's dope. Anyone sort of that you have an eye on right now that you would like to work with, both from Korea
Oh
or actually from
man,
anywhere?
so many. One or a couple people that I've been speaking with, for example, is like Audrey Nuna, or Umi,
Mhm.
and
Love
most
both of them.
recently, yeah, incredible. A few weeks
Incredible.
ago, I happened to run into both Keshi, Nikki at Jeremy Zucker's album launch
Oh
party.
yeah, release party. I saw that.
Yeah, which
Cool.
was super
Yeah.
fun. But it was just like those spontaneous moments where we just kind of run into each other, like, hey, let's write. And we're like, okay, let's
Yeah.
do it. So all these people, like, I feel like everybody's so busy as we're all kind of slowly easing back into touring and doing
Yeah.
live shows. But at one point would love to try to get something written with all of them and
Yeah.
put stuff out into the world.
Eric, I don't know if this is on purpose or subconscious, unconscious, or what, but everyone you named is an Asian American artist. And like that's pretty cool, right? So Audrey and
Yeah,
Umi and Keshi and Nikki, like all so like super dope Asian
yeah,
American artists. I love that.
I do too. I think it's this moment in time where Asian Americans, we're on the early end of a moment. I think we're building it.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
can say, we have Shang-Chi, we have all these TV shows and Oscars. And I was like, okay, but for the music side, we're still building it. I think generally we're still building it, and we have so much
Mhm.
more to do. And I don't want people to feel like we're done. We still haven't made it. We still have so much more work that has to be done. And
Yeah.
the best way to do that is to be active, proactive, and be invested in each other's careers and what we're building and each other's art.
I 1,000% agree because I think that, there's, maybe years ago, there may have been sort of this weird, like, competitive thing of like, oh,
Hmm.
there's only, space for one Korean
Right.
American artist or one Asian American artist. But if we even just look at the landscape of really, really dope Korean American artists right now, there's so
So
many.
many.
And like it's so exciting to me, right? I've been in this music game a really long time and I don't remember a time that has been as exciting as it is now, especially for Korean
Yeah.
Americans.
No, I
So cool.
wholeheartedly agree with you. I was, I just had Audrey Nuna on my podcast, and
Oh,
we
I
were
know.
talking.
Plug the podcast, Eric. Where can
Yeah.
people hear the podcast?
You can listen to the podcast from wherever you get your podcast. Your favorite streaming platform is called The Tebak Show,
I
and it's
love it.
also on YouTube. So we're everywhere. But I was talking to Audrey and even Ray Ami
Yeah, I
recently, and I
heard the
was like,
Rayami one too. It's so cool.
yeah, I was just like, what's really great is for me growing up, I was like, I always felt like there was nobody that I could look
Mhm.
up to
Mhm.
in the music space as an Asian
Mhm.
face.
Mhm.
And it was so like, is this even going to work out? It's not even a thinkable thing. But for both of those ladies, they're surrounded by incredible peers, who
Mhm.
are all living and breathing this at the same time. And it wasn't like oh, I wonder if I can as an Asian American. It's like, of course, why not?
Of course.
And
Right.
that change in mindset is such a powerful thing to have. And I can't wait to see what they're able to do, but what the younger kids are able to do.
Yes.
And it leaves me in a position wondering, what can I do? I mean, I'm still very, very ambitious, and I have so much more that I want to achieve with my music, but like, how can I be a proactive, more positive influence in that realm as well? And that's where I think my head's been going to in the recent months, actually.
But Eric, honestly, I feel like you're doing that. I think with your podcast even, and just like, shining a light on some of these new artists who are coming up and stuff, and having these like really super deep, honest conversations with them, I think you're doing it, and you're using your platform to bring other people up. And that's, what more can you ask for than that,
Thank you. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I guess, thank you, Grace. If that's the case, and that's awesome. For me, that's always felt like, so like, well, duh, like, it's just a conversation. And so
Yeah.
I think now it's, what can we do beyond that? What can we create together? And that's where my mind has been headed to recently.
Yeah. Awesome. We sort of touched on this, but I want to ask it just one more time to like super hone in on it.
Let's do it.
But do you think that this sort of, explosion of popularity in Korean culture is actually doing anything to open doors for Korean American culture or Korean American artists and Korean American art?
Ooh, that's a very, very good question.
It's a big question.
It's a very big question.
Mm.
I think in some ways, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I guess on that layer, it's more of people who look like us. It's not a foreign concept to see us on screen anymore. It's not a foreign concept to hear us on the radio. It's still pretty rare, but it's not like, why is this person on here, or why are they doing this?
Right.
So I think that's a great thing. I think where I see, and I kind of feel like there might be a disconnect, is as Korean Americans, we still can feel, not me personally, but I think for a lot of some of my peers, we could feel very disconnected from the entire Korean cultural movement, because they may not have lived there, or they may have never been to Korea. They may not speak the language. And so what we see with Parasite or with BTS can feel very far removed from a Korean American who's grown up and lived here his or her entire life. And so,
and do you think that actually that could have been you if you hadn't gone to Korea and built a career in Korea? And you,
absolutely. I mean, I think that's why I went to Korea, because that was the only place where somebody that looks like me being on TV or singing isn't a foreign concept. You think about it, like, this is the one thing, it's like, it's interesting. Even with like Shang-Chi, they're like, oh my God, these people are incredible actors. Like, yeah, these people are even Yoon Yo-jung, who I love and adore. She's the best. Like, she has been an accomplished, legendary actress in her own right in Korea, killing it in her game for decades. And it's just now we're like, oh my God, this lady is so good at acting. I'm like, well, yeah, that's because that's what she does. That's her job.
Right. Because she's actually an actress and has been one.
Yeah. And not only her, but there are so many more people like her in every aspect of culture that is doing that. You just haven't seen them. You have not seen them. You have not heard them yet. And so I think it's that disconnect of like, oh, I guess like, yeah, I guess there is a Korean Beyonce or Korean XYZ, whoever, for lack of a better comparative term. But yeah, I do think, I'm lucky in that I went to Korea early on because I didn't see that happening here. And that's where I kind of got my training, and I got to sharpen my knife and really hone my craft in many ways. And so I'm very, very blessed, and I'm very cognizant of the fact that I sit in a very interesting position where I feel like I'm in tune with both parts of the world. For those Korean Americans who may feel like they're not as connected to Korean culture, having lived there or grown up there or worked there or XYZ, I am optimistic in thinking that we are hitting a point in culture where being Asian American being Korean American
Mhm.
is more than enough for you to do whatever you want.
Mhm.
You can, and I say this because as third culture kids,
Mhm.
I think we have such a unique perspective.
Of
Our
course.
perspective is one that nobody else has. No American has it. No American, quote unquote, has it. No
Mhm.
Korean has it. Only we have it. But this is
Mhm.
like an
Mhm.
immigrant experience, a third culture kid experience that is shared not only by Korean Americans, not only by Asian Americans, but immigrant children anywhere. And there are
I
so many of
completely.
us.
Completely. You know what's interesting is that you saying that brings up this thing that I've been hearing a lot. Like, so when Minari came out, I think it was such it like shook us, a lot of us Korean
Mm,
Americans, right? It was the first time that we had seen a Korean American immigrant story on film that way. And I mean, I feel like all of the Korean Americans and actually all of the immigrants that I know are friends with all sort of related to it in a very specific way. And
mm-hmm.
what's different is that Korean people in Korea didn't see it that way,
Yeah,
and it just really sort of reinforced the notion of the uniqueness of a third culture kid, whether that's a
yeah.
Korean American or whether that's any other something hyphenated American, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
think it's that immigrant experience that is so unique. And to your point, just really brings out a really special perspective.
Yeah.
So shout
I,
out to us.
yeah, shout out to us. I
Yes.
that's like my latest thing. I'm like, we should be empowered by the fact that we have such a unique perspective. We
Yeah.
should be empowered and use that to our advantage to be and do whatever we want. And
Yeah.
so that's what I've been thinking, and I agree with you on that Minari point of Mina. Should I say Minari or Minari?
I feel awkward saying Minari when
I
I'm like,
know, right?
but like,
But then I feel like I've been in LA for a bit. Everyone's like Minari. I'm like, okay, so Minari. It's yeah. In Korea, I was like, "What'd you think? What'd you think?" They're like, it's like it's fine. It's just a very American thing. I was like, okay, I get it.
interesting,
I
isn't
know
it?
what you mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it was I don't know. It's a very
There is
cool
sort of a unique
spot.
heartbreak and experience that comes from like having lived an immigrant life, right? Either
Yeah.
as, in the parent's perspective or as the kid. So yeah, there's a really unique. Anyway, um, switching gears again. So in addition to the music and the
Hmm.
podcast and the thinking about issues affecting third culture kids, I would say that, you maybe are a bit of an activist in some ways. I
Me.
remember, yes, I would put that on you. And you know what? It's funny because, an activist doesn't mean that you don't have to be somebody who's out there on the streets and, as part of any march or rally, but I think it's using, again, the platform that you have to talk about issues that are important. And, you certainly did that, with the piece that you wrote in Time Magazine back in March.
Mm,
And I remember, I think that week and the weeks following were like so super traumatic for Asian Americans, for Korean Americans, um, and really sort of highlighted how difficult the past year and a half has been
yeah.
uniquely for Asian Americans. So I don't know if could you talk about that a little bit? Like what was the process of writing that like and how did you feel about it? And how do you feel now, sort of, 7, 8 months after the fact?
Yeah. Man, that was a whirlwind of I'd say a week, but also, this entire pandemic period has
Mm,
been tough, I think, for everybody. But
mhm,
I, it was crazy because I happened to be in Atlanta when the shooting happened. I was with my parents. I remember I was working and I got the news and I was like, oh my gosh. Like I couldn't focus like the rest of the day. My
mm,
day was a wash. And um, I got the call and they're like, "Hey, do you mind putting a piece together? You're from Atlanta. We can't think of a better person to put something together." And I was like, well, guys, I haven't written a piece since college. Like, I haven't written like, it's, and I don't know even where to start. And I think the thing that terrified me the most is with such an important, tragic, heartbreaking event, what can you say? Like, how can you say anything? And beyond that, as a Korean American, as an Asian American, I feel like anytime we are asked to do something or put something on, because we have such relatively few opportunities, it makes every single piece feel so important in terms of what it says to culture and to the broader world. And so at first I said no, because I was like, I don't want to mess it up, and I don't want to like take away from what should be, not even take away, I don't want to negatively impact whatever is going on.
Yeah, like an unintended consequence.
That was like my biggest fear. But I sat on it and I was like, if I don't do it, I like, who is from Atlanta, who is Korean American, who is living, like, who is literally right down the road, who's from there. Like, and I was like, I've always been a person that says, like, talk the talk, but also walk the walk. And like, literally you have to do what you're going to say you're going to do. And it was like, when I have these opportunities, or when I'm asked to do these things, I have to put my best foot forward and like hope that people don't misconstrue it, and that I'm adding to the conversation in a constructive and a productive way. And so I kind of like, I think I had like 24 hours to put it together. I was like, my brain was like,
whoa, that's it?
Yeah, it was like,
wow.
It was like a day or like 30. It was like really, really tight. It was like 24, 36 hours, something like that.
Yeah.
I kept putting it off, and I was like, okay, midnight, I'm just going to sit on the couch. And I just went draft after draft after draft. And I had some really, really great friends help me edit. And because I couldn't help but be emotional. Like,
of course.
And livid and sad and like so many emotions. But to put it into a cohesive piece was incredibly difficult. But when we hit go and we got it out into the world, it was incredible, because the response was everything that we had been feeling for such a long time. I guess for some people, they felt seen and they felt heard, and it was articulated in a way where it's like, that's exactly how I feel. I just didn't want to say it.
Right.
And so that to me was, very like, oh, I'm really glad I did this, because I'm glad somebody somewhere feels the same way. And that even if you aren't Asian American or Korean American, you now have a better understanding of how we feel, having grown up in this world, in this country, and having to witness the atrocities that are happening to our community. So yeah, that's what it was like. And I didn't really think of myself as an activist in a way, but I'm learning to rephrase and reframe what it means to be an activist just by living life.
I think that's exactly right. And I think that, it's a heavy term, I think, sometimes to put on people, and it comes with a lot of weight and a lot of gravitas and just pressure almost, that comes with that word. But I think that it's, a lot of us just have a little fire inside of us to say something and do something and use our platform to not be afraid and speak up. And I think that is a form of activism that's really important, and one that we've seen really grow in the past year and a half. So thank you for using your platform and your voice to do that.
Thank you.
So I think I have a few questions about sort of, if we can move over here to Eric's advice corner. I'm looking for some advice from you. Are you ready?
Okay.
You ready? Okay.
Oh gosh.
Let's see. Let's talk about, how about this? You graduated. I'm going to go serious, all right? So you graduated from an esteemed university, and you were set for a career in consulting before pursuing a different path, what would you say to other folks who are maybe in a similar position to that right now?
Oh, I say go for whatever you want to do, whatever your heart desires. And it's so cheesy and it's so corny and it's overstated, but I truly believe that your 20s particularly is the best time to experiment and try whatever it is you want to do.
Yes.
And I'd rather you just go for it. And even if you fail, just go for it rather than living your life wondering what if. And that was like the biggest thing for me. I didn't want to be at a certain age and be like, what if I had? Or what if I hadn't? And so
Yeah.
I've seen so many friends, you know, through my 20s just try something, doesn't work. They're like, well, still young, on to the next, we'll figure it out.
Totally.
And that's something that I think you can only do now. So go for it.
I agree. And what about for like for musicians specifically, for Asian American musicians? What would you say to those who are interested in pursuing a music career?
Well, as somebody who's pursuing a music career as well, I think I say that honestly because I feel like there's so much more that I have to do. Like I feel like I haven't made it yet. Like I still feel like I need to figure out how to unlock the key for there to be like a big moment. And that's what I'm trying to work for. I feel like any musician's
like,
always working for that.
Are there things that you think will be the like, okay, if I do, once I do this, I've made it? Or like, are there like tent poles like that in your mind of like achievement to unlock?
I think I don't have like hit XYZ number and statistic and whatever, but I would love for it to like, I would love for my music to just be either on the radio or like a household name or like anybody knows, oh, that's Eric Knob's song. Like I want it to be at that point. I don't know if there's a certain metric for that, but that is like my overarching goal and dream.
I love it.
And even if it's not myself, I want somebody else who's Korean American, Asian American to unlock that. And so that's why I do what I do in many ways, so that I can keep pushing that forward. So whoever's 15, 16, 17 right now who wants to do this, we're setting up like the building blocks so that it makes it easier. And we've already knocked down a lot of barriers for you to do that. And I don't want to sound such like an ajashi gonde patronizing person in that way, but I think subconsciously
you are hardly an ajashi, Eric Nam. Hardly an ajashi.
But to those young musicians, I think give it everything you have, like go for it. Also, do not be stubborn. Just try different things, experiment, work with different people, collaborate, and be open to constructive criticism. I think the one thing that I've always said throughout my career is, and this is just my personality, I have a hard time going in 150,000% into one thing. Like, I think I have to have multiple things spinning for everything to kind of work. They have synergistic effects. But for me, even in Korea, people like, I just want to quit my job and I just want to pursue music. I'm like, honestly, I know a lot of people who have multiple jobs and they still pursue music and they're still killing it. And that's how I felt. Even though I was doing music, I was hosting so many shows, emceeing so many things, working on music, writing for other people. Like, music is a job, but I also don't think it's like a full-time job in many ways until you make it your full-time, until you get to that point where you're like, okay, financially I'm stable enough, or I feel like I'm at this point where I can make the jump. So until that point, you can do multiple things, test it, figure it out. And, I think hopefully it goes well for all you young aspiring musicians.
Wait, I want to talk about what's coming next for you, but I have a follow-up question.
Yes.
So when you were doing all of those things and hosting all the shows and doing the music and like running around, what did you do on your time off? Or did you have time off?
I slept. I slept.
Okay,
I
fair.
slept. I think back to, I was talking to a very, very busy idol friend recently. And
who? Just kidding.
I can't say it. I can't say it.
I'm kidding. Don't say
The
it.
internet would explode.
Okay, don't say it.
But I was looking at his or her life, and I was like, it looks a lot like mine a few years ago.
Uh-huh.
And I was just like, make sure you take care of your health, because that was like the biggest thing. But when you're so just sleep, even if it's boring, just sleep, take your meds,
Yeah.
eat your vitamins.
Drink some
Oh my
water.
God, I'm such a dad. Gosh.
Stop.
But
Yeah,
it's
these are
true, because
important things.
I hit a point in my career where I was so busy,
Mm.
was barely sleeping. I was out, like, I would be doing 50 events or appearances in a month, in a month.
Wow.
And so I inevitably, you end up getting sick. You get some sort of internal something going on. You can't eat properly, and then your world falls apart. And that was a really, really tough time. And so, to answer your question, what do? I just slept. I try to sleep as much as possible. And I think even right now, that's kind of what I'm trying to do. And you have to be okay. I had to learn to tell myself it's okay to just sleep and sleep in and not be busy all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So you recently played Music Midtown in Atlanta. I want to hear about that, but also, is that an indication that more music is coming?
Yes.
Act like I don't already know the answer to it.
Grace, let me tell you about all this new music that's coming. Yes. Well, I did play Music Midtown, which is, I guess, the big festival in Atlanta, which was
and
a really
has
cool.
been. I mean, Music Midtown is an institution. So for those
Yeah,
who don't know, it's a big deal.
it was cool. I think I was literally the only Asian act on the entire building, and I was like,
Wow.
we got to get more, and that's all I kept thinking.
Yes. No, breaking down barriers. You're leading by
It-
example. This
oh
is
man,
important.
but it was fun. I was really emotional. I got on stage, I almost cried. I almost teared up because I hadn't been on stage in so long, and I was also super nervous that nobody would show up for my stage. But there was a massive pit, and so it felt really good. It was a lot of fun.
And to be in your hometown, I think, is so special too, right? For a kind of first show back moment after everything.
Yeah, it was very emotional. My parents were there. I was like, Mom, of course, like the day before she comes to rehearsal, I was like, how are you feeling? She's like, I'm anxious. I was like, why? I was like, because you're probably gonna mess up. I was like, thanks. Thank you, Ma.
Thank you.
And then I get on stage and I see my mom in the VIP section like this, just like frowning. And I was like, way to kill a vibe, Mom. But she's like always just so worried for me. She's like, oh my God, please don't mess up. And so she's like, I love watching you perform, but I also hate it because I get really anxious. But all to say, it was a really fun show. I had a great time. And then I actually went down to Savannah to shoot all these videos and music videos for an upcoming album. So I have a brand new single that will have released October 15th called I Don't Know You Anymore. And then I have a single thank you. And then we have another single in November called Any Other Way. And then we have the full album called There and Back Again, which drops, I think, the first week of January, with a 45 city tour that starts the end of January. Yes. So that's what my next phase in music looks like. Thank you. I'm excited. I'm also terrified because I'm now officially a completely independent musician. And
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great. It's also terrifying. It's also very expensive to figure out, like, how do I make this all work out? But we're doing it. We're making it happen. So
I think it's exciting.
It's been a challenge, but it's been exciting. I love the new sound. I love the new fashion that we're doing. I love everything about it, and I hope that those who come across it will find it refreshing and entertaining and love it.
I can't wait to see it live. The last time I saw you was at Webster Hall. That seems like forever ago.
Wow. Yeah, that was.
I don't even remember when that was.
That was almost 2 years ago then. It was like January of 2020, I think. Something like that.
Was it? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wild. All right, so Eric, we got to close, but to close, my last question is,
Yeah.
so obviously we are here for the Korea Society, and Korea Society is an organization that seeks to build bridges, peoples, cultures between Korea and the US. Do you have any words for the Korea Society and the Young Professionals Network that we're a part of now?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Grace, for leading this fun conversation.
Thank you.
So good at so many things. Being comparable to
I'm
Miss
just trying
Grace.
to be like you. I'm trying to be like you.
And then the Korea Society, thank you for doing what you do, for allowing different people across different cultures and societies connect around being Korean and Korean culture. I think it's incredibly important and incredibly valuable. So thank you so much. To the many young professionals who I hope are, maybe you've gotten this far, and if you have, congratulations. Very proud of you.
Seriously.
Yeah, but I just want to encourage people to follow their passions and to do and to try whatever it is they want to do. I know I touched on it briefly, but um, we are hitting a place and a moment in time in culture and society where being Korean American, being Asian American is so powerful. And we are poised to be incredible leaders in whatever industry, in whatever niche, whatever corner of the world or earth that you are living in and creating in. You are more than capable of doing so. And so I hope to meet you in person one day and we could talk all about what incredible things you're doing. But until that day, just know that there are so many people who are rooting for you. I'm rooting for you. And there is an entire population of people who are hoping that you absolutely slay and kill
Yes.
whatever you are doing. So keep your head up, even in times of adversity. And I cannot wait to greet you in person sometime soon. So thank you so much.
Oh, I love it. Eric Nam, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Tom, the team at the Korea Society, for hosting this conversation. This interview will be uploaded to the Korea Society's website and YouTube channel. So for those who are interested in watching the video again, please visit the Korea Society's YouTube page. And if you're interested in checking out other programs and special events year-round in art, culture, policy, and business, the Korea Society also offers memberships for students, individuals, and corporate sponsors, which you can check out on the Korea Society's website. So again, thank you so much to everyone watching. I'm Grace Lee. This is Eric Nam. We'll see
Thank
you later.
you. See ya.
Bye.
Have a good one.